Hi friends, my name is Caitlin and I am the owner of Sass and Stitch. For the past 4 years now, I have been designing simple and modern crochet patterns, and I actually just released my first crochet pattern book just this year. I recently had the opportunity to begin teaching crochet classes at my local art guild in my county, and that really inspired me to finally sit down and make this YouTube video, how to crochet for an absolute beginner. A lot of my patterns are fairly simple, but they're not from the perspective of a beginner, so I've really challenged myself over the past couple of months to come up with a handful of very simple, very beginner, anyone can make this crochet patterns, and actually sit down and make a video tutorial about how to crochet from zero knowledge. And by the end of this video series, hopefully you'll be able to make something like this that you see here, which is one of my ultra basic crochet patterns that I've recently designed. This is called the Mayfield Blanket. And with this video, I'll be teaching you the first phase of techniques that eventually will lead you to making something like this or any other project you might find out here. Today, I'm going to be teaching you how to make a slip knot, how to hold your crochet hook, how to make the chain stitch, and how to make the single crochet stitch, which is the most basic crochet stitch. I'll also be teaching you about how to understand your yarn label, how to find the right crochet hook, and all of the other materials that you'll need to get started. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and begin. So for everything that you're about to learn in this video, you are going to need some yarn, a crochet hook, a needle, and a pair of scissors. Now I'll dive actually into what you'll need for each of these items. I'll be displaying these techniques using worsted weight yarn. I know that it's worsted weight based on the yarn label. Every single yarn label will have a number on it. Usually it's with this skein of yarn icon, has the number 4. This means that it's worsted weight yarn. Now, if you are someone that has some random yarn laying around your house, maybe from a friend or a grandparent or family member, you most likely have worsted weight yarn. This is the most common yarn weight, and it's the most common for the acrylic yarn. So you already most likely have some of this on hand. But if you don't, that's totally fine. You can work with any other yarn weight you have, or you can just run to your store and grab one little skein. So normally when you're working with worsted weight yarn, so you can check your label, and they'll also have crochet hook size recommendations. This one in particular is suggesting a 5mm crochet hook. So I have a 5mm crochet hook here. You can also use a 5.5, sometimes even a 6. Anywhere between a 5 and a 6mm crochet hook will be perfect for this tutorial. I'm going to be displaying it with this yarn, which is also a worsted weight, just for the fact that it has a little bit better stitch definition, but it's no different than working with this yarn, so any worsted weight yarn will do. This is just what I'll show you on so you can see the clarity of my stitches a little bit better. At the end of our project, we'll be needing a yarn needle. You can use a metal needle, or typically crocheters will work with a plastic needle like this, and this is how we're going to weave in our yarn ends so that we have a finished looking project. And obviously you'll need a pair of scissors to cut your yarn at the end of our project. Usually I keep a small handheld pair with me in my project bag, but this I have on hand right now, so this is what I'm showing you here. Okay, so we are first going to learn how to make a slip knot. This is the first step to virtually any crochet project. There will be a technique you can learn later on that will not involve a slip knot to start a project, but this is the most common way for starting your new project. So what you're going to do is you're going to start unraveling until you find the end of your yarn from your skein. This is going to be called your working yarn, the side that is attached to your skein still, and this is going to be your tail. So when you're starting a project, you want to be able to leave enough of a tail so that you have room to weave it in later. If you were to only leave this much of a tail, it's really hard to work with to hide this tail at the end of your project. So you want to leave a good, at least 6 inches, maybe more. More is always safer than less. So you're going to put your tail to the top of your working area. You're going to take your index finger and drape your tail on your index finger. Then you're going to take your tail and wrap it all the way around your finger again. And you can just hold these two strands in your fingers here to hold them together. Then you're going to take your back loop and move it to the front of your finger. Then you're going to take this back loop and move it completely off of your finger. And then you can pull up to tighten that knot. Now you have a slip knot. The purpose of a slip knot is that it is adjustable. It's an adjustable size loop, so if I had a massive crochet hook, I could fit that into this loop, or if I had a small crochet hook, I can put that into the loop here and I can tighten it on my hook. The other thing about a slip knot is you can also just pull the two sides and pull it completely out. So if you ever need to restart a project, it's easy to just undo without having to cut off and waste your yarn. So let's do that again. I'll lay it with my tail at the top of my area, put my index finger under so it's resting on my index finger, wrap all the way around and hold these two pieces here. Take the back loop and move it forward, then take this back loop again and move it completely off of my finger and pull tight. Now I'm ready to insert my crochet hook. Now I would recommend you using your dominant hand to pick up your crochet hook. Some people will use their non-dominant hand. It just depends on your comfort level. Might take you a couple times to play around and see which hand you like best, but I am right-handed for everything I do, so I'm going to use my right hand. And I'm going to put the end of my hook into that loop. I'm going to tighten it up. You don't want to tighten it completely so hard that it's hard to move this loop around the hook. You want to leave it a little bit open, but you also don't want a huge gap like this. So just find it a nice medium space where you really don't see any gap, but it can freely move about the hook. Now there's primarily two kinds of ways to hold your yarn hook. You can hold it as if you're holding a knife, like you're going to be cutting some meat like this. This is how I like to hold my hook. The other way is you can hold it like a pencil, like you're going to be writing. Personally, I like to hold my hook like a knife. And you can also hold it anywhere on the hook that you'd like, especially with these are called ergonomic hooks. I think you're supposed to hold it down here. I have a better grip on my crochet work if I hold it up here closer to the head. So I usually don't end up holding it where I'm supposed to, but there's really no rules in crochet. You do whatever is comfortable for you. The other aspect that is really going to be taking time to figure out what's best for you is how to hold your yarn. You want to hold your yarn in some kind of way to give yourself tension. Otherwise, if you're just holding it and you're trying to crochet, your work is going to slip everywhere. It's going to be very loose or very tight if you're holding it too tight. So this is going to take some figuring out for yourself. I'm going to show you how I hold it, but I hold it differently than anybody else I've seen it. Every single person, every single crocheter that I know holds their yarn differently. So you are probably not going to hold your yarn the same way that I do. But I like to, I like to put my index finger under my working yarn. Again, this is my working yarn over here, so not my tail. I like to put my index finger under my working yarn, and then I wrap it around my middle finger. So I'm just gonna wrap it around. And for me, this is plenty of tension. Some people wrap it around their index finger, some people wrap it around their pinky, some people just pinch it, which feels very difficult for me to do. But again, you're just going to have to figure that out for yourself. Just find a way that feels comfortable for you. Okay, so now we're ready to learn the chain stitch. This is our foundation for basically any project where you're having to work a square or a rectangle or just any foundation to your work, unless it's something in a circle. You'll start that out a different way. But if you're not working a circle, you're going to be working a foundation chain. This here is a foundation chain. So this is what I'm about to walk you through just now, but I wanted to do it real quick ahead of time and show you what we're about to be working so that you understand what you're supposed to be making. A foundation chain is going to be, usually it's going to be the width of your work. So if this is as long as I did a foundation chain, my work is going to be this wide, and we're going to grow in rows up our work. So I'm going to take all this out back to my slip knot so that we can do it together. Okay, so I'm holding my hook the way I like, I'm holding my yarn the way I like, and now we're ready to learn how to make a chain. So when you're starting out making your chain, you also want to hold this slip knot still. If I were to not do that, my slip knot would just rotate all the way around my hook and I would get absolutely nowhere. So I like to hold this slip knot, the base of my work, still with my middle finger and my thumb of my non-dominant hand. This way, when I'm working, I'm holding it in place and it's not going to wobble around everywhere. Okay, now I'm going to do what's called a yarn over, where you see my working yarn in my left hand. I'm going to bring that to the back of my crochet hook, up and around my crochet hook. So now my working yarn is on the front of my crochet hook. And now I need to bring this strand of yarn through this loop. So I'm going to start moving my crochet hook down until I catch that first loop. And then I'm going to pull my crochet hook all the way through that loop on my hook. Now, one tip that I have for this, when you're pulling this through, you see how the head of the hook part is facing to the side. You're going to tend to struggle if you have it with this hook, the head of the hook facing towards you directly. You're going to just end up catching that other loop that you're trying to pull through. What I recommend is once you start pulling through and you catch that first loop, then you rotate the head of your hook down so that it can pull nicely right through that loop. And then once you do that, you want to make sure you pull back down your hook to the fattest part of your hook head. I'll show you with this hook here. We have the slant for the head of the hook here, and then we have the slant for the thumb grasp right here, and this part in the middle is the actual size of the hook. So if I were to be only keeping my chain stitches up here, then my loops are going to be smaller than what my hook is intending it to be. So every time I make a chain, I need to make sure that I'm pulling it back down to the fattest part of the, well, not the fattest part, you don't want to pull it down to the thumb hold, but to the real size of the hook right here. So for my hook here, I have a pretty good length from here to here where it's the actual hook size, and then it gets a little bit bigger for the ergonomic handle. But I can pretty much tell if I stay in this general vicinity, it's going to stay the actual hook size intended. So let's walk through that again. So I have my working yarn over here. I'm going to bring it back behind my hook, up and over my hook so that I have two loops on my hook. And now I need to pull this loop through the first loop on my hook. So I'm going to start drawing my hook back until I catch. And I'm going to rotate down so that I can easily pull through that loop on my hook. And I'm going to scoot my hook back up so that my chain is the intended size it's supposed to be. So far we've done 2 chains. We've got 1 chain here, 2 chains. The loop on your hook does not count as a chain. That is just the active loop. The slip knot also does not count as a chain. So it's a little bit hard to count right now. I'm going to do a couple more and then I'll show you how to actively count your chains. So let's do another one together. We're going to go from back up top to the front and pull that first loop through the loop on your hook and scoot it back down. Again, go back to front and pull through the loop on your hook. Scoot back up. One more. Let's go back to front and pull through the loop on your hook. Okay, so now we've done a little bit more so we can more clearly count our chains. So these chains are these little V stitches. They look like little V's. Each chain has a right side and a left side. So those count as 1 chain. So this down here, the right side, left side, that's 1 chain. Right side, left side, that's 2 chains. right side, left side, that's 3, 4, 5, and this loop on your hook does not count as a chain. There's also a back side to the chains. You see these humps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are called your back humps. Sometimes a pattern will tell you to work into the back bumps of your chains because it sometimes makes for a cleaner start to your work, but we'll get more into that later. So let's continue chaining until we have a total of 16 chains. Now, I've been showing you that you can move your yarn as a yarn over and pull through. Another thing that when you might get more experience you might do is you might, instead of moving your whole hand around, you might be able to just move your crochet hook. So instead of doing a yarn over with your yarn, you can just get your crochet hook under and pull through. So whichever method is more comfortable for you, you can move your whole non-dominant hand, or you can just move your crochet hook up and down like this. As long as you're getting your yarn from the back over to the front, it does not matter how you do it. So let's keep doing chains until we get to 16 chains. I have not been counting, so I'm going to pause and count my work now. If you ever need to take out your crochet hook, you absolutely can. What I recommend is just pulling a larger loop so that if the working yarn happens to pull a little bit, you're not going to lose the work that you just did. Because if you just start pulling, your work is just going to pop out like that. So I recommend leaving a tall loop just in case. So let's count how many I have now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and this loop does not count. So I have 14, and I said we would get to 16, so I'm going to do 2 more. So 1, 2. And now I have a total of 16 chains. This is going to be my foundation chain for starting my first row of actual work. Okay, now we're going to learn something called a single crochet stitch. This is what one row of single crochet stitch looks like, and this is what multiple rows of single crochet looks like. I just wanted to show this to you so that you know what you are about to do. So let's go ahead and backtrack to our starting chain. You should have a starting chain of 16 chains, and we will go ahead and get started with our first single crochet stitch. Okay, we are now ready to begin our first single crochet stitch. So the first single crochet is going to start in the second chain from the hook. So this is the loop on our hook. This does not count as a chain. This is our first chain, and this is our second chain. So like I mentioned before, sometimes people tell you to work into the back bumps of the chains. Personally, I feel like that's a little bit more of a advanced beginner technique to identify those. So I'm just going to show you the way that I prefer to teach is just to work into the front of the chain here. So again, we're going to be starting in the second chain from the hook, and you see that there's this top loop and this bottom loop. We're going to be inserting our hook into this top loop here. So with your crochet hook, now personally you might find me putting my index finger on this loop on my hook. This is so that when I insert, I'm not accidentally going to drop that loop. So I like to just hold my finger here to keep it still. I'm going to insert my hook up into this loop of the second chain. Now we have 2 loops on our hook. Now we're going to do a yarn over. So bring it from the back all the way around to the front so that it drapes over our hook. And we're going to pull this yarn over through just 1 loop. So we're going to pull until we catch that strand and pull through just that first loop. And then we're going to scoot our stitches back so that they're the appropriate size of our crochet hook. So now we have 2 loops on our hook again. We're going to do another yarn over, and we're going to pull through both of these 2 loops. So pull until you catch it, rotate down so you can pull right through those 2 loops. And again, adjust your crochet hook. That is a single crochet stitch. Now you see this little hole at the bottom. This is the chain that we just worked into. I promise this is not going to stay a hole. Once you work the next one, this will tighten up, and the next one will get looser, and then that one will tighten up, and so on and so forth. So again, this is also easy to identify that this hole is where we just worked into. So now we know we're going to jump to the next chain. Our next chain is right here. This is our next chain. So we're going to insert again into the next chain, yarn over, and pull through just 1. Adjust your hook, yarn over, and pull through 2. And that is a single crochet. Let's work it again. So remember, this is the hole. See how we've already, this one has tightened up a little bit. Now we have this more obvious hole here. So this is where we just worked. You don't want to go back into that big hole. You're going to work into the chain loop next to it. So we'll insert, yarn over, and pull through just 1. Adjust your hook, yarn over, and pull through both loops. So again, we'll insert, yarn over and pull through 1, yarn over and pull through 2. That is 1 single crochet stitch. Insert, yarn over and pull through 1, yarn over and pull through 2. We're going to continue working this all the way across our chain until we get to the very end. So keep working these methods in each chain across to the very end. There's no need to really count as you go, but at the end we will count our stitches together to make sure that we haven't missed anything or haven't done anything extra. So go ahead and pause the video and work your way to the end and pick up right back here when you're ready. I'm going to show you these last 2 stitches. I've got one more, so this isn't the big hole that I just worked into. I'm going to work into the next one. And the last one might be a little bit tricky. Sometimes your last chain can be a little bit tight, especially if you're a beginner crocheter. So remember, this is our last chain. We don't work into the slip knot here at the very end, just this last chain. So I'll do my last one. And at this point, if you did a starting chain of 16 like I did, you should now have 15 single crochet stitches. You will always have, for single crochet, you will always have 1 less than your starting chain, because remember at the very beginning we started by working into that second chain from the hook, meaning we skipped that first chain. So we'll always have 1 less than our starting chain. Now I'll show you how to count your single crochet stitches. I always like to start counting from where I am, not from where I started, because it's just easier for me that way. And I like to count from the top view instead of the side view. So if you turn to the top, you'll see these V's. You'll see these V's at the top of your work. Come on, camera. There we go. So once again, just like when we did our chains, this loop does not count as a stitch. So we're going to start counting right after this working loop here. 1, this is the first V set. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. You'll see this one kind of merges down, and you might see another little set of V's here on the very end this way instead of this way. This is that first chain that we skipped. This is what gives you the height for your row. So you count all the way until the very end of the top view, not down onto the side. So we have a total of 15 single crochet. This is our first row, row 1. Now we're ready to start row 2. So I'm going to put my hook back in, tighten it back up. Now when you're working single crochet, at the end of every row, you're going to do 1 chain. So just a reminder for a chain, you do a yarn over and you pull through the loop on your hook. That's 1 chain. Now we are going to turn our work over. We're just going to flip it from this way. We're going to flip over like this. So in crochet, you're always working the same direction. You never work back and forth, back and forth. You're always going to work, if you're right-handed, you'll always work right to left, right to left, right to left. If you're left-handed, you will always work left to right, left to right, left to right. So because I'm right-handed, I'm flipping back over, and now I'm on the right side of my work again. I'm going to work all the way across to the left side. So let me get reoriented here. Now we're ready to start row 2. So I'll show you where we're at. We've got the loop on our hook. This does not count as anything. We've got our chain 1 that we just did. This does not count as a stitch. We're going to be working into the first stitch, which is right here. So again, our working loop, our chain 1, and then we have our first stitch here. Now, every top of a stitch will have a set of V's, like we just counted right before this. When you insert your hook, I'm going to act as if I'm about to start my first stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook down and into this first stitch. You want to make sure you're picking up both of these top loops. This now counts as 1 stitch or 1 loop. I know there's 2 loops, but in terms of when you're working with your hook and pulling through, these act together. So there's a front loop and a back loop. For the regular single crochet stitch, you want to pick up both of these loops. So I've inserted into both of these loops, and I'm going to work my single crochet now. So I'll yarn over and pull through 1. A reminder, that means that you're going to pull through both of these loops because this is acting as 1. In other terms, someone else might say yarn over and pull through the stitch. So that might be how someone else describes it. Yarn over and pull through 2, just the same as before. The only thing that changes now is the view of what you're working into initially. And this is going to be the same for the rest of your project here. The starting chain is the only one that's different, where you're just working through that 1 loop. Okay. So you can see, do you see these 2 little legs here? 1, 2. These are from the single crochet stitch we just made, and they're going into this hole here. That means we've just worked into this stitch, and now we're ready to work into the next stitch. So we're going to take our hook, insert into that next stitch. Make sure you're picking up both of those loops here at the top. Yarn over and pull through 1. Or in other terms, pull through the stitch, yarn over and pull through 2. And that's another single crochet. Working into the next stitch now, insert, yarn over and pull through just 1, yarn over and pull through 2. And you'll continue working that all the way across your row. Again, you're going to be keeping the same stitch count for the rest of this swatch here, so you're going to have 15 single crochet stitches by the end. I'm going to continue working until the end, and we will review our work together. You can go ahead and pause the video, and I will meet you back at the end of the row. Okay, I'm almost at the end of my row. I have 1 more stitch left to work, but sometimes telling where the end of your work is can be a little bit tricky. So if you're ever approaching the end and you're not sure if you have 1 stitch left to work or not, I recommend pausing and counting. As long as you know what your stitch count is supposed to be, you can easily make sure you're on the right track. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to count my work. So not this loop, not the working loop. I'll start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You'll see this loop here, this is my chain 1, so my 14 ends right here, and I know I need 15, so that means that this is the last stitch that I'm going to work in right here, 15. So I can reinsert my hook, insert into that stitch number 15, and complete my single crochet. And that is row 2. So you've got row 1 and row 2. Now we can move on to the next row, and this is the same as we just did before. The rest of your swatch is just going to be simply repeating exactly what you just did in row 2. So we're at the end of a row, we're going to chain 1, and this helps us grow in our height to the next row. If we didn't chain 1 and we just immediately turned and started working, this first stitch would be kind of slanted because we're not giving it any height to grow to the next row. So that's what the chain 1 is for. This is to grow our height, and we're ready to flip our work over so that we're back on our starting side of our work. Right side if you're right-handed, left side if you're left-handed. And again, we're going to start the start of the next row. So we have our working loop, our chain 1, and this is our first stitch. We'll insert into the first stitch and make a single crochet. And now you'll single crochet all the way across your work until you know that you have 15 stitches. At this point, I am going to let you loose, and I'm going to let you work as many rows as you desire until you feel comfortable working the stitch. I recommend working at least a total of 6 rows. I know I haven't taught you how to count your rows yet, but I'm going to work ahead a little bit, and I will meet back up with you when I have several rows to where I can show you how to count your rows easily. So keep working several more rows. Right now you should be on row 3 still. Work until you have at least 6, but more is always better. And I will meet you back here in just a moment. Okay, so I have worked a total of 8 rows, and I'm going to teach you how to count your stitches. So just at a quick glance, you might be able to tell that there's kind of 4 distinct ridges here on my work. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're working the single crochet stitch, it kind of makes these nice ridges of 2 rows each. It can be a little tricky to count the rows individually because the single crochet stitch has a different look from the front side and the back side of the stitch. And every other row, this is the side we just finished, so this is the front side of a single crochet. You see these 2 little legs that I pointed out earlier, and the row below it is the back side where you see these kind of horizontal loops across the work. So I'm going to start from the top and we'll work down to the bottom. I've got a row with the little legs, that's 1, and then with the horizontal loops, that's 2. I've got another row with the little legs, that's 3. Horizontal loops, that's 4. Legs, that's 5. Horizontal loops, that's 6. Legs, that's 7. Horizontal loops, that's 8. And then down here we have something extra, which is our foundation chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like I mentioned, you can create any number of rows you'd like because this is just a practice swatch. A lot of people recommend that you make a full square, but if you feel comfortable that you've mastered the single crochet stitch by this point, then you can stop anytime you'd like. So now at this point, I'm going to teach you how to finish off your swatch, or basically anything you're working. This is how you will finish it off. And then how to weave in your ends so that you don't have these loose tails just hanging around your completed crochet work. So when you've decided that you are all done and you're ready to fasten off, so I'm pretending like I just finished my last stitch here. I'm going to do a chain 1. I'm going to pull this loop out just a little bit. Don't have to do a lot. And then I'm going to snip my tail, giving myself at least 6 to 10 inches. So I'm just going to cut it way down here. You want to give yourself enough room so again you have the space to work to weave in this tail. Then what you're going to do is you're going to pull the tail through this loop so that it's just a straight line, and you can pull tight and tighten this loop, and this is not going to go anywhere. No matter how I pull, what I do, these stitches are not going to come out. Now we're ready for this yarn needle that I showed you earlier. Again, if you just have a regular large eye needle, a metal one, that's totally fine. Otherwise, I would go ahead and pick up a plastic one from the store. And what we're going to do is we're going to thread the needle. So basically I just like to hold my thread, put my hook over my thread, and then push it through with my nail. That's how I get it through. And then personally I like to just tie a single knot so that I don't lose the tail and I have to re-thread my needle. Now we are going to weave in this end so that we don't have a loose tail anymore. And basically all that you're doing is you're choosing loops in your work to work through so that it's going to hide the tail. So usually if there's a front and a back side to your work, you'll choose to do it in the back side, but because this is just a swatch and it doesn't matter what side we do it on, you can do it on any side you'd like. So basically what you just do is you search for some loops nearby that you can run your needle through to pull your tail. You don't want to go too far. Like I'm not going to go pick a loop over here and it's going to have to stretch all the way over. You also don't want to go completely down through the other side of your work. You want to just kind of pick up some loops to where if I'm doing this part right here, my tail is not even going to show through on the back side here. So I've picked some loops and I'm just going to pull my yarn needle through. And now I'm going to pick some more loops. Let's see, I see these here, so I'm going to run it through there. Again, you don't want to go just down straight through your work. You want to kind of stay on the surface of the side that you have chosen to work on. And I'm going to go down through this one. I usually don't just go straight across or straight down. I do some angle work. Maybe I'll loop back around. It's different every single time I weave something in, because also your stitches look different with every project. So there's no specific technique to this. The only important thing is that you do it with enough length that your tail won't pop out later on. So like I have all this length left, I'm going to do just a little bit more. You don't want to pull it too tight that it pulls your work in on itself, but you don't want to leave it loose hanging either. Just make sure you're pulling it all the way through. I'm going to go up here. Now I'm going to go this way. I try to not go through any of the same loops twice because that will just make it more obvious. But you can loop back in the same direction if you want to. I'm going to do one more. Okay. And then before I actually fasten off, I'm just going to like give my work a pull so that I'm pulling it back to the size that it needs to be so it doesn't get too scrunched up on accident. And now you're ready to just snip off your yarn tail right at the base of where you finished weaving in your end. Right there. And now you can really not even tell that I wove in that end. You would have no clue that I just did that. Then you're going to do the same to your starting tail. Now this is where you can pay attention. I think I accidentally left my starting tail a little too short, because if I were to try to put my yarn needle on, it might just work. But if you leave it too short, then you're really confined with the length of your needle. See here, if I'm trying to work into one of these first stitches, I can't even get my needle there because my tail isn't even as long as my needle. So this is where you can really pay attention and self-improve for next time, is leaving yourself a longer tail at the beginning, probably longer than you think you even need it to be, so that you have enough to weave it in later on. Okay, and that is how to crochet for an absolute beginner. Thank you so much for watching this video. It has been a long time coming. I hope it was helpful. If it was, be sure to leave me some feedback in the comments, and be sure to subscribe, because I do plan to continue putting out more basic crochet patterns and basic crochet tutorials. So again, leave me some feedback. I'd love to hear back from you, see what you're working on. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.